Hi, and welcome to tonight's Truth Proof live stream. What do you think then, Paul? Another good week for us?
Excellent. A few UFO reports come in, a few cryptid-related reports, so no complaints. The information keeps coming. And tonight, I'll just silence this when it goes live, Les. And tonight we've got... 1 second.
Yeah. And,
tonight we've got... three amazing guests to talk to, and I'm sure our audience, fingers crossed, are going to have some great questions for them based on what they're going to share with us. We've got somebody that we're going to have on quite regular now, and that's the Revenant, because he's always got something interesting to add, even if it's not his chosen subject. His observations and his words are always pretty wise and to the point. Then we're going to speak with Earl Grey. Brilliant. Absolutely. One of the most prolific UFO researchers out there. Works with MUFON, and I think he's executive director of the ERT. I hope I've got that right. The Experiencer Resource Team. Come on, Paul, get your teeth in. And I'm sure he's going to correct me. And then we've got Nathaniel Gillis. And what can I say? I think everybody I speak really highly of Nathaniel, because his knowledge is second to none in the field that he works in. I describe himself as a demonologist, and it's not as niche as you might think. It branches out into lots of things, and when you hear this guy talk, you realize that what he talks about applies to the UFO field. It applies to everything that we're involved in within the full spectrum of paranormal investigations. So over to you, Les.
Yeah, so who we got in the chat tonight? I don't know if you can see the chat box.
We've got Simon Riley, Disabled Welshman, Alison Buttle doing some moderating for us. Thank you. We've got Skyflower doing the moderating. Ralph Winter, Stargaze Returnal, Kiss Me, Diane Farrell. I didn't mean Kiss Me, Diane, but that's just as it came up. We've got Bob, as usual. Tom Waters, that's brilliant. Hi, Tom. It's great because a lot of these people, we've met some of these people. Some of them have visited us on flip tops. Obviously, some are overseas. Dark Angel, I know who that is, and Stockholm Pearls. And I hope Ian's in, Linny, because he were out on cliff tops with us other night when we got absolutely soaked, and Peter did as well. So, all good. So,
all good.
So let's just fire away and kick off.
Yeah, on that note, Paul, we'll bring in the guests. First of all, we'll bring in Earl Grey. There we go.
Hello.
Hi,
how are you
Earl.
guys doing?
Really good, my friend. And correct me, the Experiencer Resource
I
team.
better. I'm an executive member of the Experiencer Resource team at MUFON, but I'm not the director or, there's 6 of us that are kind of, that we kind of run the operation, but it's actually the guy at our helm is Dr. George Medich. Wonderful, amazing gentleman. I'm so proud to be working with him. He and Kathleen Marden started the ERT at MUFON.
That is brilliant.
So everything else was fine, Paul.
no, very measured. Great stuff. And Nathaniel, great to see you.
Thank you for having me on. I'm the least of my brethren here tonight, but I'm here to learn and hopefully add some value to the conversation.
Well, you will add value. I know it.
There he is.
Revenant, how are you doing?
Evening. Yeah, good. Everybody okay?
All good. And I'm sure after you've heard these two speak and we get some questions from audience, you're going to have a few musings and observations yourself.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to them both a minute back. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to them carrying on. It'd be good. Yeah.
Yes. So, start wherever we start. I mean, what do we think to recent whistleblower revelations that have come out? Has anybody got any views on that?
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of blowback out there coming from actually a lot of the UFO public. We've been hoping for some disclosure for decades and decades now. And now that it seems to be happening, a lot of people are sort of questioning whether it's valid or not. It's coming from Congress, folks, And actually, Congress is meeting currently with MUFON quarterly in a secured skiff. That's how, seriously they're taking this. So it's a different day and age.
And the guy who's come out with these bits of information, he's got some high up military personnel backing his words and his integrity as well, regardless of the fact that he's been played down as it's all hyped up. There's a lot of top backing up what he's saying, isn't there?
He has everything to lose if he's lying. If he's lying, he's under oath. He can go to prison for it. What could possibly be the ulterior motive behind that, other than this guy is
telling the truth,
trying to get this out there? Yeah. Yep.
And having your finger on pulse with MUFON, is there more to come out? Is there more information due out? Have you heard anything?
Oh yeah, well, it's interesting right now. I think that in Congress, in the Pentagon, going beyond congressional members, in the Pentagon, I think there are two different viewpoints right now. I think that there's a group that wants this information out, at least some light disclosure, to where people are finally told, yes, we're not alone in the universe. There isn't another intelligence out there. They're interacting with us. But that's my guess is that they're probably going to try to shut it off right around there, because they're not going to want to have to answer for things like how they reacted to the Roswell crash, or there's literally bodies buried around the object, so they're not going to want to go there. I don't think that they're going to want to talk alien abduction and visitation stuff. They don't want to have to say, yes, this is really can't protect you from it. And I think that is a concern. And then there's the other group that in the Pentagon that just wants to make this all go away and say that it's just Chinese spy balloons and prosaic all the way to the core. And they want to act like both groups want to act like this is something new, rather than something that's been happening for 90 years, apparently. According to David Grush, he's saying that, they first crash was like around 1938. So they don't want to, they've tried to rebrand flying saucers. They rebranded as UFOs. And then, a couple years ago, they tried to rebrand it again to UAP. And that way they could pretend like this is something new that they were unaware of.
But, well, obviously we can't be fooled anymore, Earl, can we? What's your views on this, Nathaniel?
I echo Earl Gray's sentiments. I think that they would have a lot to answer for. I can remember Lou Elizondo in one interview. He said, if we're going to accept the idea that they're here, which they are, then we have a lot of dark, he used a profanity, to answer for. And I think that's a conversation that once we open the door to their existence, we're going to have to ask more ontological questions. And some of them are going to be uncomfortable, even for the secularist worldview. It's going to be very difficult for us to understand what's going on. But I've been hearing that there's going to be more whistleblowers come forward, which I think that's what we're all looking for. But I also believe there's going to be whistleblowers within the governmental community that have experienced these beings, not in the sense of seeing crafts, but have actually connected with them and had communication with beings themselves. I think that that's going to be, at least in my perspective, far more interesting than anything else.
And we aren't going too deep because we want to hear what Reverend thinks. How do you think the religions of the world will cope with the knowledge that we are being visited, and we have been visited for a long time?
It's a good question. In my perspective, comes from experiencing them firsthand, at least these researchers. My father has flown in Hebrew scholars from Israel plenty of times, and I've been able to ask them these questions. And right now, the evangelical community is struggling with the vocabulary to even articulate what's going on. With their worldview is defined by Catholic demonology, these certainly, there's something completely alien, if you will, to what their understanding is. And so they're groping in the darkness. What can we say of beings that can literally trigger bilocation in a person? What do we do about that? Is that in the text? And so I think that if they're going to place these beings within the demonological blueprint, there's going to be a lot of moving and shaking within that community.
Any views on this, Revenant?
Yeah, I mean, as regards to whistleblowers, I always take it as a, with a pinch of salt. If somebody blows the whistle and survives, then there might be something to it. But or there might not be something to it. Sorry, but if they die, that usually means they've been telling the truth. Where the source has come from and his backings within the government, I think are quite dubious as to maybe just leading us up the garden path as to distract us into something else. There seems to be more asking questions about the religious aspect and the alien aspect being one of the same. So it's kind of, they're leading us that way maybe, and that would then lead on to what you were on about, Nathaniel. So yeah, I just take it with a pinch of salt myself.
Yeah. Do you know the book that I wrote, Night People, and I'll be talking about those experiences at this conference in August. These beings that I saw in childhood, I've said they're alien, but I like to stress that they're alien to everything we know and understand. For all I know, they could have been demons, and I've said that for years. And are we just separating them by name? Are we looking at one in the same? Because I really don't know. And if they're extraterrestrials, should we be afraid of them? If the demons, should we be afraid of them? I know what happened to me were terrifying, but I don't know whether they were alien as in from up there or whether they were something else. I'll just throw that out there. Anybody who wants to have a go at answering it.
I think that it goes beyond like ghosts and demons, because there's a physical aspect to this phenomenon. I mean, I've heard the other complete diametric opposite. There's one view that the military is doing this. It's a psyop, that they're using holographs and brainwave technology that the general public doesn't have yet, and they're creating, setting the ground for like a false flag alien invasion,
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's so many different views right now, and it's probably healthy for us to just stay open to them all. But I think it goes beyond demonology, although I think sometimes
100%.
people probably do misidentify demons as ETs. Like, once I get a case or somebody, it sounds very much like an oppression where it's just constant, every single night, every single day, hearing voices and weird paranormal like stuff going on. And oftentimes, if I get a case like that, I will ask the person, do you have a religious background? Can you go to a priest and tell them what you're telling me? But other cases don't have anything in common with what you would consider an oppression or a possession or something related to the paranormal. So that's what we're dealing with, I think.
Really? Okay. Any views on that, Nathaniel?
Yeah, I think that our ancestors feebly attempted to place a face on this phenomenon. And in doing so, anything that was paranormal or extrasensory was deemed demonic. I think that what we've been able to do now is look at the bloody footprints of the snow and their behavioral patterns. The scarifications placed underneath the eyelids, for instance, and some of their sexual pathologies as well. It's deeply troubling, but it does mirror what we would consider to be the modern interpretation, the UFO abduction phenomenon. My research, what I've been mainly focused on, has been their sexual pathologies and their victimologies. Is the oppression at a certain time of the year? What is the entity calling itself? And what I've noticed is that there is a secondary intelligence here, obviously, but that has used the demonic mask in order to manipulate us. I would refer to a book by Ariel Masters. It's called Eros and Evil, which was absolutely incredible. And he's dealing with the sexual pathologies of, quote, demons. And in the Middle Ages, women were being abducted in the nighttime, replaced with a familiar spirit, which we got to see through that, obviously. And the woman thinks that she's on a demonic flight. And so she's taken to another location. She's approached by a corpse or a demon, and copulation occurs. But in the middle of that scenario, the frequency or technology fuzzed in and out. And for a fleeting moment, these women look around and they realize that these were not demons. They were not corpses. These were metallic objects poking and prodding them. When I first got a hold of these case studies, I realized that, oh my God, which Earl Grey's right, there's something here that even demonology is not fitting. And I believe it's because that it's possibly, obviously, that it's just another mask that the phenomenon is wearing in order to kind of hide behind it. And so if we look at everything, include all of these case studies into one umbrella of phenomena, then we start seeing that we're dealing with a hyper-intelligence that is just incredibly manipulative.
Oh, yeah.
Jacques
Vallée, his Passport to Magonia book, it becomes more and more relevant to me every single day. This is nothing 100%. New. It's you had many masks, but it is essentially another intelligence that's non-human, that's highly technological. And I think it's been here forever. You know, the airships of the 1800s, the, weird, you can go back to Renaissance paintings with a flying saucer over, Virgin and all that. They just didn't really know what to call it. So they'd call it demons, angels. And we still don't know what to call it either.
Do you think that we're dealing with one all-encompassing intelligence then, or I'm reluctant to say this, but you know what it means, the Godhead, or have we got a multitude of phenomena, not phenomenon, all sort of coming through into our sphere of existence and interacting, or is it just one?
I think it's a multitude of various and sundry things that are going on. It's not all just one thing.
Any views on this, Rev?
Yeah, from my perspective, looking at it in terms of what we know physically in the world, take how we live, how animals live, everything always has its central point where it starts from. So, but given the different aspects of different types of phenomenon, it would look, or it certainly appears to have one central head for each aspect, which then develops and splits off into many other sort of tangents. So I can't really say, but that's how I'm sort of seeing it in my mind anyway, like that.
Yeah, okay.
Whether there's a central force behind it all that has, the energy source that creates everything is the same for all of us, isn't it? So wherever that comes from, it has to be the same for that.
Okay, right.
Good point.
Right. Anybody? I know we're going to get to some of Earl's cases that he's been working on recently. Well, we're never going to get through them, because how many did you say that you've worked through whilst with MUFON? 900, was it?
Not well. Right now, I'm working on my 963rd case. I think it is. We're getting to close to 1,000 cases, which may be a record of some sort. I'm not sure, but there are 3 cases in particular that, and I didn't know what we're going to talk about tonight, but it just fits. Synchronicity is at work, obviously. Because I've got both 2 military cases. One was seemingly benevolent. The other one was seemingly benign. And but both have many markers in common. But the outcome of either case, they couldn't be more different. Very, very strange, but they're connected, I think. So we can go. I have the case files open whenever you guys want to go there.
Well, obviously we're going to jump into them, but if throw this out to 3 of you, and Les if he wants to add anything to it, and people in chat, let's have your questions in capital letters, please, for our 3 guests here. But if any of you could experience just one part of this phenomena, what would it be? Or one thing? Anybody got any views on that? I mean, everybody's researching, everybody's looking into this. But if there was one thing that you could research, it's like a wish list, but because it's not going to happen, is it? It does not present to order. But what would it be? Or a piece of knowledge to give you that answer that you're looking for? What would it be? To Nathaniel.
Okay. I would lean heavily into Ray Fowler's work and the idea of the possibility of them being the butterfly form of us and us being the larva form of them, specifically referring back to an abductee's version of her events, saying that they told her that the soul itself is a different species than the body it inhabits, which is a mind-blowing hypothesis. Oh my God, my head was like, what? So I would like to investigate that more, and I would like to experience that near-death aspect of the phenomenon.
Okay.
Ray Fowler, wonderful guy. He's getting up there in the years, and the poor man is pretty much 100% deaf. So it's difficult for him to do radio and things like that. But his mind is sharp as a tack, and
he's brilliant.
He's still out there doing his wonderful work. But such a good guy too. Just a very sweet-hearted person.
Is he working from home in silence, or does he do conferences?
Yeah. He works out of home, and I was introduced to Ray by Ray Hernandez is who introduced us, and it was just over emails. I've never met him in person, but the guy is sharp. He's a brilliant golden age researcher of the UFO phenomena. Wonderful ideas too.
So what about you then, Earl? If there were one part of what you've researched that you could get an answer, maybe not experience, but
I know exactly what it would be. Is a lot of you may all know this, but my mom worked for officialdom. She was one of Howard Hughes's personal secretaries, and when I was 5 years old, she told me this story where she more or less disclosed to me that she had worked in a deep underground military facility under the desert. She said she called it the little city, the little underground. And I've heard the same terminology from other people. It may have been White Sands, New Mexico. That probably is because she was friends with Werner von Braun, and that's where he was stationed. Or it could have even been a 51. I mean, my mom went on to be a headhunter for the aerospace industry, and worked a lot with Lockheed. So it could have been there because I've seen blueprints of I guess that Hughes had one of the first labs there that was from an outside government, a contractor rather than from the Pentagon itself. So, but wherever my mom was stationed, she told me about this, because later on she told me that she never would have said anything except as 5 years old. She thought that I would forget it. And to her horror, I kept bringing it up and bringing it up and bringing it up. So I would really like to know. I've had a couple of guys from the DOD tell me, I've read your mom's file. Your mom didn't lie to you. You can be very proud of her. And then I will ask, well, read a little more from my mom's file for me. And they both the same thing. I'm sorry, no, your mother's file is still sealed. I would love it if that file was opened for me and that I could know exactly what my mom was involved in. She said that UFOs and alien life, that we already know that it's there, that's not a question. And she was very, very emphatic about that.
That's fabulous. And what about you, Rev? I think I might know what you would like an answer to, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think, it'll surprise you. I'd like to know how it all fits together. I'd like to know where, like in the food chain, if you want to put it like that, where we sit. Because I think until we understand and appreciate that, we can't. We can't understand it, can we? So that's what I'd like to know, and what I'd like to experience is maybe time travel or traveling through a wormhole and seeing how that feels, and if I can stay in one piece as it happens.
Right. Okay.
You get real thin, is what I hear.
That would work well with me because I need to get thinner myself.
I think we all
the
do.
wormhole diet.
There we go, brother. There we go. I'm on that wormhole stuff.
Well, I hope we're going to get some questions, but perhaps we could try one of these case studies that you're working on at the moment, Earl.
Well, sure. These are actually no case is ever completely closed, right? I go back all the time, and I'll get an addendum to put on a case file, sometimes from a witness 5-6 years later. But these were two cases that I just kind of picked at random, and interestingly enough, they fit in exactly with what we're talking about. Both of these were military abduction cases. The first one happened in 1968. The next one after that happened more recently, just a few years ago. I'll read a little bit from his case file. It's CMS case number 99018, and I'm going to redact any personal information, because that's what we do. But his own words: I was at a group party with a couple of guys from work. I was a Marine with the United States Marines at the time. We finished up doing what we were doing. We were playing with a Ouija board, which I don't agree with. So I left the party. It was about 10 o'clock p.m. on a Friday night. I had a 20-mile ride back to the base. I was driving a 66 Ford Satellite, which was kind of a hot rod. Anyway, as I was driving, I heard a voice. It was plain as day. The voice said, "You need to lie down. You need to sleep." This voice kept going in and out. At first, I thought it was something on the radio because I did have the radio playing in my car. The weird thing of it was that I saw something. It was a strange light coming from out in the orchard that I was passing. Suddenly, electric tendrils of light, sort of like you see with a Tesla coil. Well, this electricity was coming from out of the dashboard, and it was everywhere. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And the car began slowing down by itself, slowing way down until it stopped in the middle of the road, and it wouldn't start up again. I'm a car guy, so I jumped out of the thing. I was saying a few words, maybe a lot of words. I popped the hood. I looked in there with a flashlight or torch for you guys. I looked at the wires, tried tightening things, and it was strange. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. The voice returned, kept telling me to go back to the barracks and lie down. So I did. I went back to the barracks. I lay down. And he goes on to talk about how he got there, and it was a Friday night. Most of the guys were out, on leave and doing stuff. His bunkmate happened to stay there. So he saw his bunkmate. He told him that he was tired out. He was going to go to sleep. And he got up into the rack. He said that he pulled the covers up, and all of a sudden time became very strange. External sounds became muffled. He felt like there was this light that was surrounding him. And he felt his body, he said, physically lift up and out through the very rafters of the barracks. Now, he said that, let's see here. He suddenly found himself in low Earth orbit, no spacesuit. He somehow or another was kept, and he said that it was physical. It wasn't an out-of-body experience. He could feel his flesh. He could grip his hands. He was there. So anyway, it said that he saw a flying saucer is what it was. He was pulled into it. There was something that looked like a garage door. I'm reading from his account again, but it went sideways. It was on its side, and it opened up like an accordion. It rolled backwards like that, and when something put its hands on my shoulders, I was standing in an upright position, but something touched me, and I was shocked. And suddenly I was paralyzed. I could move my eyes. I could still use my voice. And then I heard a voice in my head that said, "We have total control over you. We can now control your body." I was being looked at. I was being stared at. There were a bunch of eyes, black eyes, looking at me. And there was something behind me that was taller than I was. At first, I thought it was the devil because we'd been playing with a Ouija board. But later on, I realized that this was something way beyond that. The voice was telepathic. The creatures had very tiny mouths like slits, so the voice was in my head. After the voice told me, we have total control over your body, I told them, no, you can't. When all of a sudden I lost all control of myself. They had left me in a standing position, but they didn't need a restraint. I couldn't move. I tried to turn to see the face of the creature that was behind me, and he told me, don't try it. Don't try and turn around. We will now control your mind. Everything went dead to me, arms, legs. It sounded like he was speaking English to me, but I don't think they were speaking a particular language. The thing behind me said, we've taken your mind and your body, and now we're going to take your soul. And as he said that, I shouted in my mind, you can't do that. I belong to God. And I started praying and praying. But this thing kept saying that he was going to take my soul. And when he said soul, I knew that meant my inner self, that they would own me forever. So I fought for my soul and my mind with all of my strength. I wanted to put my inner self into, they wanted to put my inner self into containment of some kind, and I wasn't having it. I felt like I wanted to fight. The big creature who was in charge, who was behind me, finally allowed me to turn my head. I looked at the creature, and he looked kind of like the images you see of gray aliens, or only taller. I began crying. I was going to pieces, yet I kept fighting with him in my mind. And next thing you know, I'm coming to on the barracks floor, 5 a.m. My bunkmate was yelling at me, shouting, what the hell happened to you? My bunkmate said that he had been looking for me after I'd gone to bed for a couple of hours and couldn't find me. So I was physically taken. It wasn't an out-of-body experience. I was totally covered in sweat. It was puddled on the floor from the top of my head to the soles of my shoes. I had red splotches all over my skin as well as black spots, completely covering my body. He goes on to say that his bunkmate kind of helped him get to the shower and clean up. And that he was very, very confused, as you could imagine, for a few days. But he was a Marine. He had to go back and be this strong person.
Do you think, Earl, that the board somehow put his mind into that state to connect with this?
I have a theory of what's going on. Of all of the abduction and visitation cases that I've worked on and investigated and closed, again, whether they are seemingly benign up front or malign, I think what they're trying to do is to get a reaction, especially from our military. As you know, UFOs have shut down our ICBM bases. And it seems to me like the people in the military are treated a bit more aggressively and with more interest. I think that the fact that we are a warrior species, that we have new capabilities, and we're about to enter the space age, it makes it personal, and it causes us to be a threat. And they're trying to understand why our technology is way up here, and yet we're still reacting like Genghis Khan and a band of marauders. Okay. So I think that that's kind of what they were doing. They're trying to, because I have another case, and I'm not even going to read from the file on this one, but it was a Navy guy.
Just to cut through you just a second. Yeah. Just has anybody got any observations on what Earl's just read to us, Nathaniel or Revenant?
It's just pretty full on, isn't it? It's hell of an experience, that.
Yeah.
For me, it mirrors a lot of the demonological literature, these experiences where first, especially the behavioral pattern of we want to put you to sleep first, or we want to get you into some dream state. In ancient literature, they were called dream demons, where they could only have access to that part of the soul or that part of our potentiality through the dream state. Something that's also I'm very interested in is this semi-physicality that's present. It's very strange. Like if you get into a lot of the Collins Elite research, it was that out-of-body experience, but it wasn't, where these experiences are, I'm here, but I'm not. I'm here, but I'm nowhere. and the whole experience, the person's thinking, okay, this is either physical and it becomes a dream, or it's not physical. It's very strange. One experiencer said it like this: she became physical again. And so that's what speaks to me about that. It's a fascinating case study, no doubt. And one thing that does interest me is the idea of, are they manifesting to us, or are they manifesting through us? What part does that Ouija board play? Are they conjuring us to conjure them? Who are the real conjurers here? But I think that's an incredible case study.
It really is. And I mean, for me, I mean, obviously Earl's looked into this a lot deeper, and we're just skimming the surface of it. But for me, the Ouija board, and I'm not an advocate of that, by the way, but it's had some part in it. That's what I would be thinking, simply to set his mind into that state, to have the experience, and then you kind of wonder, as Nathaniel said, are they manipulating our mind? Has he actually been where he thinks he's been? Is in outer space or on the edge of space, yet he can still feel the physical? You know, I'll jump briefly to the things that happened to me. At one time, these beings in 1997 were in the bedroom, and I'm in bed with my wife. I think she's been in chat, so she'll be listening to this. But they're either side of me. So but I'm in bed, and I think I'm in bed, and I'm being told I'm in bed, but they're either side of me, which is impossible because she's at side of me. So is it mind? It's got to be some form of mind manipulation, you know. And you touched on it earlier, Nathaniel. I don't know what part of it we were actually talking about, but I saw them once as a child in the bedroom, looked away in fear. Probably turned away for no more than a couple of minutes, but you know, a little boy would probably think it were 10 minutes or whatever. When I turned back, I was looking at people from my mum and dad's wedding album. Seriously, not the church, not the grass, a row of people from mum and dad's wedding album. And all I can think now, looking back after all these years, because I'd been about 5 years old, we're a relatively poor family, not loads of books on shelves in house, nothing to do with unexplained or paranormal. But we did have a wedding album, and I had looked at that picture, and it's almost like they've flicked through images in your mind and give you something that's going to make you feel more comfortable. Right. So
screen images. Yeah.
The mind manipulation, it must play a monstrous role. I don't know, just throwing it out there.
Do you think it's maybe a physical or a physics manipulation of atoms, if they're able to move through stuff as well as be physically?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's maybe something to do with the frequency that they're able to operate and put human bodies into that frequency range in order to lift them through and do what obviously they do. So
and this descent into what I call the lower silence, this strange bubble of what, there's no other word for it, strangeness.
That's the word.
Yeah,
the
lower
bubble.
Silence. Yeah.
They create a bubble around you, and then the weirdness happens.
Well, are they creating it, or is it the environment that we're being transported to that makes it feel weird, and we're having our mind manipulated, still thinking that we're in the car on that dark road or some other place? I know there's 1,001 connotations as to what this could be or is, and unless we kick these ideas about, we're never going to get any closer, are we?
You know, later on, this guy, the same Marine corpsman, he wound up having these positive experiences and these were more where he was actually in a dream state, but he found himself flying this blue translucent globe-shaped craft over the San Diego Navy shipyard. And he could see every little detail. He said that it was hyper real. And they're like teaching him how to fly a craft. And it happened over and over again. And it was very positive. I mean, it was strange talking with him. And I interviewed him and his whole family, his wife. And she said, well, you know, my husband has PTSD, but it's not from going to Vietnam. It's from what happened in his barracks that night. But the weird thing is that now he seems to love those entities because they were teaching him how to fly a UFO. And it's not the only time I've heard that story. I've had many. It's like this recurring thing that I hear from cases to cases, where people are taught how to fly an unidentified flying object. I mean, what's going on there?
Yeah, you've just hit it on Ed, Earl. What's going on, and what is it? Is it the emotion that we're giving off that they're somehow feeding on? So
maybe,
yeah. So
it could be vampiric.
Yeah, well, the same entities, the same intelligences are kind of deriving something from extreme fear, deriving something from elation. I don't know, because does he think did this guy think it was the same intelligence, the same alien type beings that did both things?
He did. And, I mean, my wife and we had an experience much like yours, Paul. A lot of us have. I mean, when you poke at the phenomena, you can't be surprised because it pokes back. It's an interactive thing.
Yes, it does.
It's not like you're separate from it looking at something on a microscope slide. It's like the double slit experiment with photons. It would become a wave for somebody that was expecting light to react like a wave. For the guys that had a presupposition that it was going to act like particles, it acted like particles until they just came up with kind of a useless nonsense term, the wavicle, which doesn't make any sense. But they had to create a nonsense word for this thing that was happening that didn't make sense. And it was this interact. And that happens with us.
Yeah.
So is it vampiric? I don't know. I mean, with me, they took a lot of blood and energy, but then, like this guy, it wound up being this positive. I realized that synchronicities were happening. I mean, I didn't know what we were going to talk about. I just picked these two cases, right? And they fit right in here, and that's a synchronicity, and it happens all the time.
It's good to kick these things around, isn't it? I mean, you've just said with me, they took a lot of blood. I don't know what, and I didn't expect to be talking about what I've called the night people, but as a child, I didn't know what they were doing with me. All I knew, it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But just a little analogy, and because I want to know what Nathaniel thinks about any of this anyway. As we'll have all at some time in his life laid on his arm and it's gone dead. It will make sense to people in a moment. So that arm goes dead. It's just lifeless. And if you're laid in bed at night or in a very quiet place and you know it's happened and you move, you can feel that life coming back into the arm. Do we know what we're talking about here? I think everybody.
Well, that's a very good analogy.
At times when these beings were there, when in childhood, it felt like every part of my body was doing that. Round and out, and I thought it was to do with blood. I always did, and I wrote that in Night People, and that's what prompted me to say, Earl, when you said that then. And I don't know what people's thoughts are on that, if any.
Wow.
Well, they seem to be interested in blood or certain blood types or whatever. I don't know what they're looking for within the blood, but they're definitely, that happens a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. It reminds me of, again, coming from the perspective of demonology and their case studies. Father Sinistro of Amino is a Franciscan priest. Both he and Montague Summers detailed entities that were milking, and this is what Sinistrari said, milking the carcasses of the recently deceased and going in there taking substances and excretions from them. It's much like the incubi and succubi. So if it's not parasitic physically, it is spiritually in a sense. I mean, the entity that I encountered as a young man, it would almost create a fabricated fear and then feed off of that. But I think, that hypothesis is centered around, okay, are these beings one and the same, or are we compartmentalizing them? Does that make sense? But I'll throw this out there. I want your perspective on this. There is this idea that there's something occurring when the out-of-body experience is happening. I was working with a remote viewer who was encountering these beings out of body. And one day he came back into his body, and from the inside out, subdermal scarification, skin anomalies became to the surface. They were religious amulets. One, so is there a relation? I mean, one was an Egyptian hieroglyphic. So is there a relationship between the markings that we're witnessing on some abductees and some of the out of body experiences that they're involved in? In other words, is there something being done to the soul that we're witnessing manifest through the skin to the surface?
Did you say to the soul, Nathaniel?
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah. I mean, because it reminds me of the case study. I would have mentioned it earlier, but it reminds me of the case study that Earl Grey was talking about, because this gets back into Ian Stevenson's work, right? And dealing with near-death experiences, past lives, where there is something that is occurring to the soul that's manifesting on the skin. We've seen that with Betty Luca, right? And I have her book behind me where she gets back into her body, and all of a sudden, certain things happen to the skin itself. So is it possible that just like when you're talking about the case study of some people learning how to fly the craft, are they flying it right physically, or is it their soul? So I think that's a very interesting. I don't know either. I think it's a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I will say this, that I don't believe that my guys that I had an experience with were demons, because I feel closer to God than I ever have in my entire life. I mean, you're talking to a guy who was a pre-seminary student when he was young. You know, I almost became a minister. So I do know the difference between, you know, the feeling of being in accord with God's spirit and the opposite. While this was scary as hell to me, it wound up bringing these manifesting gifts that we usually attribute to our visitors themselves. I mean, my intuition levels went through the roof. My empathy became just so strong I could feel people's feelings, which I couldn't before. And again, I feel very, very close to God, spiritual, not religious. You know, it's a big difference. No dogma. That's out the window. You know, that's the stuff, you know, you throw to the dogs, right? But the proximity and closeness and feeling in accord, like in Buddhism they call it the Wa Wei, when being along with the grain of the wood instead of against it. That's what manifested. And also, I mean, it seemed like the world of ufology opened up to me like a flower. Suddenly I was, you know, speaking at conferences, and my casework became tripled, quadrupled at points. So it doesn't seem demonic at all. I think of like a Shaolin monk will sometimes hit a new acolyte in the back with the blunt end of the sword to scare them, to wake them up, to catch their attention, and to make them think differently. I think that my concept of UFOs and our visitors was all very, very nuts and bolts. I was thinking about it in the wrong way, and they wanted to redirect me. How better to do that than to scare the hell out of me and then hand you all of these beautiful things, you know?
Yeah.
That's how I take it anyway. I'm not necessarily correct, but that's the best hypothesis I can
I think that's all we can do, Earl, isn't it? You know, ultimately, his own truth is only one that we really can go with. You know, I know we can be swayed by what other people say. I see Les is back in the room. So have you anything to share with us, Les?
Yeah. Great response in the chat tonight. Some great questions, which I'm hoping to get through at this very shortly. First of all, I've got to say thanks to our super chats contribution tonight, and thank you very much, Rivington Pint Beast Lee Roscoe. Thank you as always, and thank you for your continued support, Lee. Right, we've got a question, and it's kind of a local one, kind of for you to jump in, Paul. You may know something of this, but the question comes from Richard, and Richard is asking, there's another big UFO sighting in Hull a few days ago on the Hull Daily Mail newspaper. Do you know anything about that?
I'll probably know more than what's been in the paper. I think when I read it, the guy has reported the sighting to a UFO website UFO UK, I think. So, I'll give them a plug. Get over there and have a read about it, because apart from seeing the UFO, there's not a lot of detail from the whole Daily Mail. So I can't really help you with that one, I'm afraid.
Okay. Right then, kind of a basic question from Lorraine. If I can actually get it up there. There it is. So who's going to answer this one first? Is it Earl?
I think it's got to be Earl.
Yeah. MUFON is the world's oldest private non-governmental UFO research group. They started back earlier than 1969 as the Midwest UFO Network. 1969, our government closed the doors project book and decided to report to the public that UFOs were nothing to worry about. They didn't say that they were real. They didn't say they were not real. They just left it as they're nothing to worry about. So when we opened ours, we became a worldwide organization. So it's the Mutual UFO Network is what the acronym stands for. Our mission statement is the scientific investigation of UFOs for the benefit of humanity, period. And that's I love our mission statement. It's my mission statement as well. I feel absolutely in accord with it. We have a large tent. There is some set of doctrinal notes that you have to apply and follow. So we have people from all, different forms of thought with this phenomenon, but the tent's big enough for all of us. And you're all welcome to join. If you go to MUFON.com, you can become a member. If you want to do investigations like I am doing, I started out as just a MUFON field investigator. You can click on a little button. It says become a MUFON field investigator. It's right there on the frontis page of MUFON.com. Just click on that and it'll tell you how to do it. You study a manual, you take a test, and then you're mentored by your local group. If you live in Los Angeles area, from San Diego all the way up to Fresno, if you're familiar with California, I have that half. So if you're in that, if you're up in the northern part of California, then my dear friend Ruben Uriarte will be your state director, and he's one of the most fabulous UFO investigators I know. But every state in the union has a state director and a group, and we have a group in Britain, as well as through Europe and the whole world. It's a worldwide organization. So I hope that answers your question. I joined MUFON about 8 years ago, and it completely changed my life. It was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Well, thanks for that, Earl. I've got a couple of questions, I think, for Nathaniel. Alex Thompson is asking a question for Nathaniel. Are demons and malevolent inhuman entities the same thing, or are they different?
Well, prior to the first century, that was the idea. If we get into the Ugaritic text, the concept of an unclean spirit was mutated consciousness, or the evolution of a disembodied being, which is consciousness. So that's where my perspective begins. That's what I've been studying as of late. Not that these beings are all horns and hooves. I don't believe that at all. But I do believe we are dealing with some sort of consciousness that's interacting with our species. But dealing with a malevolent inhuman entity, we were dealing with the species within, something that carries on its characteristics into the afterlife. Now, specifically, this is something that's it's misunderstood by a lot of people in my field specifically, and that is that demons don't have bodies. It's not true. The unclean spirit in the Old Testament needed a body. That's why it was an unclean spirit. It was disembodied. And so, but anyways, that's the two schools of thought in my field, that demons are just semi-divine, not formerly human, but the pre-existing thought was, yes, that many of them were either just deceased people, period, or evil people that died. But that's not what I subscribe to solely. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
Okay, another one I think for you, Nathaniel. hand pink waving. Oh, sorry. Dark Angel. Does Nathaniel recognize the difference between demons and demonic behavior, and how does he categorize the aliens?
Well, we're still trying to do that right now with the CE5 movement, trying to characterize and categorize these entities by our intentions. But if we're getting into what their behaviors are, and they're very similar, many of them are. But again, I think that our ancestors, in a feeble attempt to place a face on the phenomenon, they're all demons. And I stated that earlier. It doesn't mean they are. It just means that, again, we did not have a working vocabulary for what many of us were experiencing. But if you get into the behavioral patterns, the sexual pathologies, the victimologies, absolutely. But that does, again, me saying that does not mean they're demons. A lot of people, I do interviews and lectures, they take that and they run with it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm implying, though, is that there is a profound similarity between what we're calling both phenomena. And that is witnessed in their sexual pathologies, incubi and succubi cases. In my book, That Skin That Crawls, I talk about these entities, and I say that incubi and succubi are not a who, as in their entities, but as in a how, and that's the programs of self-replication that these beings have employed throughout history. So there is a connection in behavioral patterns. It does not mean I believe there's a connection in origin or an ontological existence. They're doing the same things. Now, I'll finish that. I don't want to ramble. I tend to ramble a lot. But I will say this, that what we're trying to do now, me and my colleagues, we're trying to understand the roles and the rules. Because if they're playing by different rules, they're playing a different game. And that's what I'm after.
Okay. Maybe get to some
I might just squeeze another one in, Paul?
Yeah, well, I've got one as well, which I wrote down earlier from, if that's okay, from Pat.
Right. I'm just coming up to the question. From Pat. I'm just going to show this question. I don't know if it's the one there.
No, it isn't. But
okay.
No.
Can everybody in the room see that question?
The panel believe that we should just keep dwelling in the past or start from today. In relation to, I'm not sure.
Well,
Okay.
I think she just means in general. So there is, like me and you have talked about, Paul, everything seems to just keep going round in circles. There's been a sighting.
Yeah.
No more answers than what you get from the next one. So it's important to look at the past to see where we're going, but we've got to try and move forward with stuff. And we were talking about the different types of craft that are sighted. There hasn't been any change really in that. So that kind of shows that they've not developed as much as we haven't, if you know what I mean. So I think, we need to do both. You've got to look at the past, but you've also got to keep pushing forward. Yeah,
and as regards the things that are seen, I think probably 50, 60 years ago, and Earl will probably be able to answer this better than me by looking at so many reports. Apart from the terminology, we are looking at the same kind of objects, I think, for the most part. Have you seen any big change in the shape of these objects, Earl?
Not really. I think during the 1940s and 1950s, they had an intentional kind of nuts and bolts look to them. And I think that was probably for our benefit and to help us to think of it in a different way. What I see now, a lot of one thing that's kind of interesting, and you keep on hearing it from case to case, and I even experienced it myself in a sighting, is that the dimensionality of objects can change to where, somebody will see an object that's the size of a F-118 fighter jet, and then they see the inside of the object. It's like Doctor Who. It's the size of a football field. So it's something very, very different. It's different from our physics, their physics. And they seem to be masters of time and space, and that they can manipulate both. And we see that in objects as well, where somebody will see like a triangle and it's the size of a fighter jet, goes behind a mountain, and then it comes out the other side, and it's like a mile across. I don't think we can do that.
No, I would agree.
Can I just finish this session on the questions with this one for you, Paul? I think.
Okay.
See if we can get this one up. And we know all about Dane's Dyke, don't we? And a lot
yeah,
of
my ex-partner experienced something at Dane's Dyke a few weeks ago. Yeah, Julie, it's an amazing place, and it gets a lot of footfall through the summer.
For the people who don't know, Paul, can you just tell
Dane's
people
Dyke,
where Dane's Dyke is?
I'm sat in a place called East Yorkshire, probably about an hour away from where the Revenant sat now, an hour and a half tops. Same with Les. And we've got an ancient earthwork there, Neolithic earthwork, that runs 2¼ miles. It cuts off the Bridlington, the town I live in, from Flamborough Head. It cuts off the mainland. For some reason, this earthwork's been done north to south. And there's literally loads and loads of reports of unexplained phenomena at Dane's Dyke. And Julie, I'd love to hear what your partner saw or experienced. I went in there, as people will know, for the Truth Proof YouTube channel. I've been doing these shorts, like 4 to 6 minutes, just retelling little stories. And while I was in there a few weeks ago, I went into this little coppice, a little bit of woodland, no more than 100 yards wide, that sticks about 500 yards long between two fields at the back of Dane's Dyke. Little dogs bombing about, and I've got the GoPro running. I didn't hear it, but there's drumming on the GoPro. It just sounds like a drum. I've been doing it for one at Shorts, put it together, and there's just so much strangeness occurs there. I was walking in there a few years ago with my wife, picked the camera up to take a picture. Now, I don't know what happening here, but something grabbed hold of my shoulder and pulled me back. But it was the sensation that I struggled with to find an analogy for the feeling. First, I said, you know, the car dampers, when your hatch goes up on your car, that kind of smoothness. I thought it felt like that, but I realised now it felt like two opposing magnets. That kind of sensation when you push them together and there's that invisible force. That happened. It happened again a bit further down. There's a ghost hundreds of years old of a white lady in Dane's Dyke. But the recent reports that I've had of the white lady, because obviously I can't go back 100 years and speak to these people, but it's a sphere of light they're seeing. It's a sphere of light. There's reports of cryptid type creatures in Dane's Dyke, and unusually they're occurring in October. I won't say unusually. I suppose we've got a common thread then. October they're occurring more than other times. UFO activity. People tend to have spoken about seeing UFOs, obviously in the sky, but above that area. Put a short on the other week, and I've been there today, a place called Beacon Hill, which is probably half a mile from the Dyke. And I walked up there with the husband of this lady who told me the story. She told me the story last Friday, I think it was, or in the week anyway, last week. And the husband literally walked to the spot with me that same day. She was 76 now. She was 74 when she had the experience. Sunny day, she's walking up Beacon Hill with her husband. They bump into a couple that they don't know but end up talking. And then all of a sudden, she's banged in the back and spun round backward and hits the floor. Husband thinks she's having a fit. The couple are shocked. He asks if she's okay. She tries to stand up and she's pushed down again. Unseen entity, unseen hands did that. She said, something's just pushed me down. There's a lady with her husband and children in the Dyke. Wants a wee. So she goes behind a tree, does what she's got to do. Next thing, she's crying and screaming for her husband. She claims that there's two, which feels like hands holding her down. There's nothing to see. These are just a few of the things. And I know nobody asked a direct question about Dane's Dyke, but like Les has just said, for the people that aren't familiar with it, I wanted to just paint a picture of the strangeness that is there. So, yeah, I'll end it there.
Yeah, and I'll just end. Actually, I'll end this session with a big one actually, and then I'll leave it with you guys to run with some more stories there. There we go. Dark Angel. Most religions begin with some sort of star child or entity coming down from the heavens. That is a big one. And
well, it is. Well, we're going back to stories of the Bible. I wish I didn't have to answer this one. but I suppose you're right. But a lot of the stories from the Bible could be interpreted in today's world as UFO visitation. Surely they could. I would have thought. You know, as if we're to believe that a star settled over a stable, then were we looking at a UFO? A planet couldn't really have moved, could it? And sat there. I'm not sure. Nathaniel, do you want to take this one off me, please?
No pressure, right? No, I'm kidding. You know, I think it's an interesting question. I think all of these are great questions. I'm reminded of the origin of these myths and poems. They're trapped within language that's called mythopoetry. And so the idea, though, of some star child coming down from above, there are two common thematic elements there. The first being that there was some kind of star child, extraterrestrial, hyperdimensional, whatever we want to call it, that does enter our world, and even more than that, tries to interbreed with our species. Whole nother show. But the second, though, is the idea, again, this gets back to the unclean spirit, or tumarua in Hebrew. It's the idea that there's consciousness that once it leaves, it goes up, and then it comes back down. And so we get into the Upkalu traditions and even the Nephilim, which we find in evangelical movements. But I think that if we're going to get into that aspect of it, what is a star child? Which star is it from? What are we dealing with here? Again, that does speak to the sense of a merging of species, which we would consider to be the hybridization program. But I think that has some validity to it. But I think, again, it's like my friend Paul here said, you know, these very well could be visitations by ETs, hyperdimensionals, that we've tried to encapsulate in lingua franca. Just, this is how we understand it today.
Anybody got any views on that before we close that down?
Just, it's in every single culture. You look through the Mesoamericas, from Argentina all the way up to Alaska. Every single Indian tribe has the star people coming down, bringing language, bringing civilization, hunting skills, and agriculture. You go to Australia, to the Reddit Center, you talk to the Aborigines. I have, and it's the same thing. Lightning Man came down from the sky, brought hunting skills, brought language, brought civilization. It's literally, it's just this worldwide thing. And how did that spread? How did that origin story come about? I think that we have to ask ourselves very seriously.
Any views, Rev?
Well, every culture has the same similarities in their heritage, don't they? And to have that from a tribe and another tribe halfway around the world that had no way of communicating, there's got to be some connection, hasn't there? So, yeah.
The
Absolutely.
Dogon tribe in Africa, the Dogon tribe, all around the Dog Star series, you know.
Yeah, they were following Sirius before I believe scientists even knew it existed. So, yeah, that's fascinating, is that story? Yeah.
So, just before we go to another one of Earl's cases, do aliens walk amongst us? Anybody?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you go to some pubs, you'll see them.
Tell me which pub I'll visit.
I won't dare say it, but there's a few bars in Bridlington, like Star Wars bar. But you know,
yeah. Well, yeah, I think amongst us there's obviously this veil that they're able to mask themselves in, because hence why when you take various different drugs that alter your state, people see stuff. Yeah, I think definitely there are creatures amongst us that we do not know are there.
Yeah. Anybody else any views on that? No, it's all good.
I mean, are we dealing with alien consciousness that just uses human avatars? I mean, that would be a very hard thing to define. I mean, we have cases where they've threatened people, or at least told them. There was one case in Beyond UFOs where a young man was, prior to being abducted, he's in his room at midnight and he's just getting ready for bed, and all of a sudden something triggers him, and now he's staring outside of the UFO that's coming to take him. So if he was looking through their eyes, who was looking through his? So there's this unified stream of consciousness that we have to take into consideration. The commandeering of consciousness, where they use human avatars to walk amongst us and then can remove it. And then now we're dealing with Ted from across the street. How you doing, Ted? You know, so it's a very interesting theory. But I think I will say this, at least my humble opinion, I would lean more into alien consciousness at this point than I would some kind of, dare I say, hybrid species amongst us. I've yet to see. I know that's a theory, and I want some more data before I can be convinced of that.
I don't necessarily know that aliens are walking amongst us, but I had a strange experience probably 2015. Somebody's going to correct me because I've wrote about it and I can't remember exact date, but I think it was 2015. And I've told the story before, but I will again because I'm just interested for any of you guys' views on this. Me and phones don't really work, and we've got 4 girls, so whenever they'd done with a phone, I used to get their handouts, you know, hand-me-downs, should I say. And Jessica had given me a new phone, which I needed to take to be unlocked. I left our house with my wife, Mary, and it fans out the street, and there's a barber's shop at the bottom and just a store that sells all sorts of groceries and things. Early morning, cold day, very sunny, but cold day, just approaching winter. I don't set date because I'll probably got it wrong, and then people jump on you and say, you didn't say that in book. But I just can't remember. And as I'm walking down the street, a man immediately starts shouting. And he's at the other side of the street, and there's a push bike against him. He's got trousers on, jeans on, and no shirt. And it's a cold day, bald head. And he's shouting at me. As soon as we walk out, and I thought he were on about the sun, because he's saying something, and I'll tell you what he was saying in a moment, but I thought he were on about the weather, and I kind of thought, what's he doing? And I said to Mary, I'll just answer him. And I went, yeah, enjoy the weather, mate. We've not got much left of this. It'll be winter soon, and carried on walking. And he carried on shouting. Went in and took the phone to be unlocked, and it must have rattled me because I thought about coming back the other way. But I didn't. And I walk him back down, and now he's at my side of the street with his back to me, and he's got a tight-fitting dark brown jumper on. And nothing else, I don't think, because it was that tight fitting. And we need to stress that his physique at the other side of the road, it were unusual because he looked like an action man, if that makes sense. Everything were there, but they were. He just looked plastic or spam. Do you know what I mean? As in the meat, if it is meat, reconstituted rubbish. So. I'm walking back. I know it's him. He's got his back to me, and he's sat on wall. His bike's at the other side of the street. And I said to Mary, I said, oh, my God. I said, that bloke's there. So before I get to him, he turns round. And he's got full wraparound sunglasses on and this dark brown tight jumper. And he pointed at me and went, you know what you're doing. You are bringing down the light. You have got to stop. His exact words. And I went, what? He says, so that's what he was shouting at me over the street. You're bringing down. And I said, what? Sorry, what? He went, you know what you're doing. You're causing big problems. You're bringing down the light. You have to stop. So I find myself on corner with this man. And I'd have been about, I don't know, say 53. I'm 60 now, 50, I don't know, 53. And I'm looking at him. Everybody's taller than me. I'm only 5'5", but he's about 5'8", 5'9". This muscular build, and I didn't want to get to grips with him straight away, but I knew I weren't happy because he's telling me this and he's pointing, I'm bringing down the light, and then he's talking to me, he's asking me questions, and as I'm answering him, he's turning everything I'm saying into opposite, and I can't get to grips with his vocabulary. I don't mean I don't understand it, I can't beat him with anything I'm saying. And all the time, my wife's looking at his bike because that's important at the moment as well. And then I found a bit of information out last week, believe it or not, to add to this. So I'm facing him. Mary's just to that side. And he reached out and touched on shoulder. And I was just about to grab his wrist. Seriously, guys, and stop him. That's the kindest thing I'm going to say because I don't know if I could have. As a younger man, I know I would have. But he took his hand away and he went, I'm not talking to her. I'm talking to you. You're bringing down the light and you have to stop. I said, look, I've heard enough of this, mate. I've got to go. And off I went. We got inside. I've got CCTV, looked on that. It'd gone. The barber whose shop is over the road came to us. Oh, I asked him where he was from, and he said Rickle. Didn't know where Rickle was, and we couldn't remember at the time. And then I think a few weeks later, or the following week, the Bridlington Free Press, I can tell you anyway, 2013, said a 48-year-old man had vanished, and he was from Rickle, and he'd vanished at Bempton. It wasn't him. Definitely wasn't that man that I was talking to. But I thought it was, what a coincidence, because both men, he said he was from Rickle, this man vanished, and he was from Rickle, which was odd. So anyway, Mary gets inside. She said, did you see his bike? I said, what do you mean? She said, it had no brakes on it. So he's travelled like about 45, 50 miles on this old green bike. She said, it had no brakes either side of handlebar. I says, okay, we'd got that one. And then I spoke to the barber. When I went back out, he came out and spoke to me, and I spoke to him this week as well and about this. And he goes, that bloke were waiting for you. I says, what do you mean? He says, we'd been watching him in shop because he looked so unusual. And he said, he were watching your house. He says, and when you came out, he just homed in on you, was waiting for you. And I spoke to the guy again, only this week, because we want to do a bit of filming, and I want to record this one. And what he'd not told me was that this guy had been up and down that street, our street, for 3 days. And yet he travelled 45, 50 miles on a bike with no brakes. So I know it's a long-winded answer to a question, do aliens walk amongst us? That guy was unusual, to say the least. Now, I've just told that story. You might not have had any views, any opinions on it at all, but if anybody has, I'm all ears. No.
I mean, I had an encounter with a guy on a bike in the middle of nowhere, Canyonlands, Utah, back before you had all the sports bicyclists that kind of took it over now, kind of lost some of its charm, sadly, because it was so desolate and just a primitive campsite. But this guy came out of nowhere, and he had his motorcycle, and there seemed to be this light emanating from him. And I always kind of thought of him as sort of the motorcycle angel. And perhaps he was one of these creatures. I do think they live among us. I've heard that from some people that are pretty high up in officialdom that seem very, very convinced that, yes, they're here. So, and I, I mean, I have some personal stories that I'm not at liberty to share, but I do think that they're here. I do think
you shouldn't tell us that. You're just teasing us now, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Avatar bodies, I think, is spot on. You mentioned avatar bodies. Yeah. Absolutely. I think they do that.
Any more views before we close that down?
Yeah, well, I was gonna comment on Nathaniel's bit a minute back, or before we had the questions, but with the avatars, I've been sort of studying quite a bit of the ancient history of religious and human evolution, so to speak, and I'm kind of coming to the conclusion that when life was brought here, there's only so many souls, and that's what they're looking for when they're looking into the blood. The rest of the world is they're like droids, I reckon, because I'm only told via Google that there's 8 billion people in the world. I don't see them. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it seems a bit like that. So in order to find the souls that they need, in order to do what they're doing, maybe they have to just keep testing.
Yeah. Okay.
Just something out there.
What if they churn the avatar bodies out to like clones? Maybe they have a factory out somewhere, Saturn's rings or something, and whenever they need to do one, they crash a new UFO in the middle of nowhere, and there's your avatar body. Pick up your new body, disembodied intelligence.
Absolutely.
I mean, the case we're going to go into is about disembodied intelligences that were benevolent.
Whoa.
I mean, synchronicity. Hey, talk about proof. I did not pick these cases in accordance with any predetermined subject matter. So, yes,
incredible.
Take that as you will.
I love it.
So, are we going to cover that case now then, Earl?
Sure. All right. Well, this one is a case that I had a little over a year ago, but it really kind of struck me because it reminded me very much of the case that I mentioned, the other one that I read from. So anyway, I will again read directly from his redacted case file. This is from CMS, which is Computer Management System. It's we don't have the big warehouse with the paper files anymore. We use an ingenious, wonderful computer management system to keep track of all of our cases with. Anyhow, CMS 127982. We've had a lot of cases at MUFON. Anyway, witness was in the Navy in a refueling ship between Philippines and Taiwan on April 11th, 1975. It was the witness's 21st birthday. He had been on duty, so he was sober. The witness was planning on going to sleep when his body suddenly felt engulfed in electricity. Witness is adamant that he was not asleep. Quote, I still had my personal light on over my bunk, and I had insomnia. He felt as though he was lifted up through the top bunk, through the ceiling, and through the deck of the ship. Quote, I could physically feel it as my body actually passed through things. It wasn't an out-of-body experience. Things still had their normal mass to them. I know how crazy this sounds, but I want to make it clear. It was my own body, somehow energized in a way, and I could feel it as I was lifted up through the decks of the ship, the aircraft carrier. That's what this guy was on. Witness states that in the time it takes to think of it, he suddenly found himself floating over the Earth, looking down from low Earth orbit. Quote, I wasn't taken to a craft. I don't think they need spaceships. They're somehow beyond the need of anything like that. I think they did something to me, so I was protected from the vacuum of space. I felt comfortable. It was like I was in a shirt sleeve environment. The Earth took up 2/3 of my view. There were two beings with me. Both had bipedal human shape, but they were made out of pure energy. They looked like they were beings of light. The witness was floated over the Pacific rim of Earth. He was shown a worldwide tectonic disaster where all of the volcanoes of the Pacific Rim suddenly became active at the same time. Quote, I know the Yellowstone area quite well, and that's where I was hovering when it happened. I'm not sure if I was shown a possible future or if what I saw will actually happen someday. I felt strangely connected to every living thing, including the two beings of light who had taken me up. When the tectonic disaster happened, I could personally feel every death, every horrified emotion of every human as their lives were suddenly ended. It was as though I experienced their deaths myself. I think the beings cut my experience short out of fear that I would have a heart attack. To this day, it's still the most profound thing that I've ever experienced. I was returned to my bunk right there and then. I still felt electricity moving through me, but the experience was over. In a way, I felt sad, abandoned somehow. I've never felt such love and compassion as I felt from those two beings of light, and I hope someday I'll meet them again. I felt as close to them as if we were family, and I still feel like that. My postscript here was, the witness was eloquent and expressive. He became very emotional while speaking of his experience, reduced to sobbing twice as we spoke for over an hour. This witness doesn't desire hypnotic regression, and he doesn't need it, as he remembers the entire incident as though it had happened yesterday. Anyway, it said, I closed this as a unknown, and I put a little in parentheses, and I usually kind of keep opinions out of stuff, but it was almost like a note to myself. What an extraordinary case. There you go.
Once again, I took from that, or part of that, emotions once again, that, they're showing him disaster. Then he's got feelings of elation and feelings like these people are as close to him as closest people that he knows on Earth. And why do these beings? I'm obviously I want to hear from Nathaniel and Revenant, but why do these beings, these intelligences, show us images of disaster and catastrophe to people that can't do anything to change the world?
They're gauging our response, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it always seems to be military, and I think that they're very curious how humans can have empathy, can write symphonies and do all this, cause beauty in the world, but then they can turn around and kill each other in mass. I mean, war is pretty much just it's just mass murder.
We can cross a stretch of water and suddenly, we want to cause mass harm to people that live there, don't we? Yeah, it is. It's strange if you're not that way inclined, isn't it? It's crazy. Has anybody got any views on this, on what Earl's just read to us?
I don't.
Sorry, after you, Nathaniel.
I don't specifically. That's what I was going to say. I'm going to ponder that case study, my friend. That was awesome.
I love these.
I think the feeling, still having feeling as you're passing through, it seems to be like they're not quite turning the frequency high enough. Is that an experiment? Is that to see the difference? How physical you can take something through? You know what I mean? I don't know. That's what I'm getting from it. It seems that way. They're just playing about and seeing what they've got on it.
Yeah.
It's the fact that that we're being shown so many different things, and I still think that they're deriving things from our emotion. And I know that Nathaniel talks about the soul, and it's almost like some of these entities are devoid of that. They're devoid of the part that would make Nathaniel cry, Earl cry, me, Revenant. I don't know. I'm probably looking at it through different eyes to other people, but they want that.
Well, I'm the feel that I get is that the Earth is the heart of the universe, and the information that I've been looking at is you can't pass through the magnetic fields around the Earth unless you lose the physicality. So without the physicality, you lose sense of feel, taste. Them emotions go. Emotions can be brought on by electromagnetic pulses. So if you lift frequency, if you play electrical currents at people at certain frequencies, you can bring happiness, elation, all sorrow, everything can be brought on. So it's, to me, that seems to be I believe that they're trapped within the Earth or within the magnetic fields. They can't leave either, and they're very curious about everything that we've got that they don't have, if you know what I mean. It's great having brilliant technology, but if you've got no soul, then what are we? Yeah. That's what makes a human being, isn't it? Is that soul? It's that experience.
I think that's what I wanted to say, Oni. You said it better there. Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
The soulless body, the bodiless soul. It's very interesting. One thing that does strike me odd, because I had to kind of ponder this thought before I articulated it. I was like, I don't want to tell people about this yet. But when we get these case studies where there's some impending apocalyptic doom, and then we don't get dates to this impending apocalyptic doom, then I'm forced to believe that they know it's going to happen, or they believe it's going to happen, but I don't know of any dates. I mean, I've had people, especially the remote viewer, who was given prophecy after prophecy. Many of them were accurate. I mean, just articulate, detailed, descriptive, and then the next day one of his prophecies would fall face flat, just completely wrong. And it's disturbing in the sense that if these beings are so knowledgeable about the afterlife or disembodiment and even just the future, or can even fictitiously create near death, they know all of this. How could they not be willing to say, hey, listen, I want to tell you about this date or something? It worries me because not only is it existential for us, or at least assuming it is, but when, if it's so important, give us a time frame or a timeline. Maybe they have, but it's very interesting.
Or is it a trickster element? Because you said that, there's times when his predictions came true, or in very close a very close time frame anyway, and then the next one would fall flat on its face. Is there some kind of trickster element to this?
If it's not trickster, if you want to answer that, Earl Grey.
Well, I feel like I feel like they're trying to teach us something. I don't know that it's a threat or a warning. It's almost like the ghost of Christmas future, you know, and I, you know, I know some interesting people, and that happens when you've been doing this for, you know, as long as I've been, you know, although there are people who have been doing this, you know, much longer than me, obviously, but you know, I don't really see, and maybe this is my naivete, okay, but I don't see a malevolent force here at work, or vampirism, or you know, and that might be just, you know, maybe that's just me, and maybe they are here to eat us, you know, drink our blood or what have you. But it seems to me that like I've had a couple of UFO sightings since we had our visitation. And they seemed like they were teachable moments. Like I was actually, you know, it's like, hey, you've got the wrong concept about this, and let's show you, you know, first person so you can see. I mean, I had a UFO sighting where I was 35 feet away from a craft. When I was like 100 to 40 feet away, I was doing everything the way I was trained to do. You know, getting ready to call the MUFON office, going to do videos, going to, you know, but there seemed to be a threshold that I passed. Now I was driving. This was a daytime sighting. It was 6:30 a.m. in the morning. I was on my way to work. When I was working as a nurse, you know, on my way to a home care nursing case, which I didn't really particularly like. It wasn't my favorite case I'd ever worked as a nurse. But suddenly, when I got like 35 feet away from this thing, time became strange. Sounds outside of my car were muffled again. You couldn't hear external traffic sounds or really anything. It became kind of weirdly abstract. And suddenly the most important thing in the world was that I wasn't late to work. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to be late to work. I drove past this miracle, the smoking gun video, the smoking gun photos. I mean, I should have been calling the press and MUFON home office and get other eyes on this, knocking on doors, getting other eyes on it. More witnesses, the better. I didn't do anything I was trained to do. Drove right past it. When I was maybe like 30 feet away from it, and it was just on the side, you know, looking through my side window, when I first saw this thing, it was this boxy looking craft, roughly in the shape of a V. It looked rusted out. It was certainly not a beautiful object. You know, leave it to me to see an interstellar garbage scow. You know, but that, you know, I mean, I always want to see a hot rod. I want to see the cool flying saucer, right? That's, you know, with all the lights and the windows, and that's always been something that I wish to God I could see. That wasn't what I was given. It was almost like I was being told, you're thinking of this in the wrong way, Earl. You're thinking of this like race cars or rocket ships, and that's not what this is about. What was the size of a F-118 was suddenly the size of a freaking football field, and it was about a mile away. Even still, I didn't stop. I didn't take photos. I didn't take video. It was like I wasn't under my own control. Kept on driving towards the freeway. When I was maybe 3 miles out, I stopped my car. I'm standing there shaking my head, my you know, face palming. What the hell did I just do? I was ready to fire myself from MUFON. It was like I was chief investigator at the time. It's like, God, I got hands off. You know, they need to put somebody else in here. I didn't do anything right. But that was the point. You know, they were showing me something. You know, that you may think that you've got this under control, that they're under the microscope and you're going to do this, that, and thus and such. But proximity causes a highly suggestible state. And, you know, it doesn't seem like a malevolent thing for somebody to be teaching you something. And I think that it seems to me like they're trying to get us. They know that we're ready to enter the space age. you know, in the way we are now, we're going to get out there. It's going to be Star Wars instead of Star Trek. And I don't think they want Star Wars. So they're trying to elevate our vibration, trying to get us to evolve, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes using pretty brutal tactics to get people to stop thinking this way and to understand the phenomenon for what it is. And that's all I got to say, you know.
It brought just a short story to mind when you said that. There's Scarborough, another holiday town, about 20 miles from here, and in between Scarborough and a place called Sledmere, you've got Langtoft. I know I'm saying locations and people won't know these locations, but there's a valley, quite a deep valley that runs parallel to road. And a guy travelling to work towards Scarborough, he worked at a coach company, and he contacted me afterwards because he couldn't understand why he didn't stop. And he's travelling early morning. He says, there's only me on road. And I look down into the valley and there's an egg-shaped object, metallic. He says, I don't know if it had landed, but if it hadn't, it were only a few feet off ground. He says, and there's little beings that don't look like humans outside of it. And as I'm looking down and I'm driving, I can see them. And he says, but I didn't stop. I just drove past. He says, and he can't understand for the life of him. I know you're saying that it's a lesson, Earl, and you're probably 100% right. But is there not some kind of mind manipulation going on here? Because is that part of the lesson, you know?
Yeah, I think it's part of the lesson.
Yeah.
We're disabled as a species. Apparently every other species out there is telepathic, and here we are, you know, doing chicken scratches and monkey howls, you know. And I mean, what is that? You know, how come we haven't been able to tap into that as a species? That's something that's of concern.
Well, Les has appeared. It's probably got some questions, but after the questions, I just want to throw this out to Nathaniel. You talked about your encounter.
Yes.
After we've had some questions from Les, do you want to give us 5 minutes of it, Nathaniel?
Afterwards?
Okay? Yes,
that's fine. Yes, it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys. Great show so far, and plenty of support in the chat for this stream. And I've got to thank everybody who's come onto the stream tonight from wherever you are in the world, UK and the rest of the world. So on that, I've got some statements, not so much as questions, but statements, really, or pointers, or what you want to call them. Awake 09, and I'll just put that question there on the screen. Regarding religion, it's intriguing that the Vatican houses an observatory and has acknowledged ETs. Anybody want to comment on that one?
Apart from to say that that's true. I've got no knowledge of how much detail they've given about other intelligences. Does anybody?
Diana Pasolka Walsh.
Look her up.
American Cosmic. Were you going to mention that, Nathaniel?
Yes, sir. Good job. Let's do this. Go ahead.
Look her up. Google her. Okay. Or just buy the book, American Cosmic. It's wonderful.
Right. Have you read this, Nathaniel?
I have. It's so funny, you know. You would think that if everybody's studying the same subject, we would all come to the same conclusions. I wish it was so easy, right? I wish that was it. You know what I mean? And then we could just all go get a pint or a beer or something, just live on happily ever after. Diana Walsh-Pasuka's perspective is obviously very articulate, very intelligent, very educated. So I've taken her to consideration. There's a voice that I know personally that has met with officials in the Vatican, and the hypothesis is that there's a war going on, and I don't know who to trust. Right, one's great authority, the other's a great authority. But if they do exist, I think it's going to be interesting. Are they going to be baptized? Right. That's really interesting, my friends. But that's all I have to say.
Any views on that, Rev? No.
Well, I don't really know that much about what the Vatican has said. I know what it's done in the past. And yeah, you're looking at the devil's home on earth there, aren't you, really? So who knows what's going on? But yeah, there seems to. I mean, I think the telescopes. One of the telescopes is called Lucifer 2 or something like that. And
oh my, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So there's the more you look into that lot, you find all sorts of stuff you don't want to go into.
Okay.
Give us another pointer then, Les.
Yeah, well, Mick Park, a great friend of Truth Proof, and helps us immensely in the music creation of the film Wolflands. And I think he's having a little dig at me. So I won't read it out, Mick, but everybody's going to have a laugh.
Is that Les or Mike Magnum? Yeah.
It's because he started driving that Ferrari, isn't it? That's what it is.
Yeah, well, probably, yeah. Or it might be because I want to look on YouTube to see how to drive a UFO, as Earl Grey suggested some of his.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wonder if they do put them on YouTube, Earl, because I'll be the first one to look on there, really. Okay, so yeah, we'll move on a little bit, and let's have a look.
Think you can draw stuff
one
with your actions? I definitely do.
It's interactive. Yeah. Which came first, chicken, egg, chicken?
Yeah.
You know, it's interactive. Yeah.
I think it's a state of mind that I wouldn't say evokes, but creates at least some of these. We know that there's interactions that people have. I don't know, driving home on a lonely road at 3 a.m. and they see a beam of light and suddenly there's something over the car. We've all heard that kind of story often, but there's also something to be said for the emotional state that people get in, and not necessarily UFO related, alien related, but they also tend to have experiences. And anybody with any views on this? Anybody with any?
Yep. I mean, every if you think of something, you're putting it out there. So the moment you put it out there, it's created. How much energy you give to it is whether or not that creates into being physical. So, yeah, the more that I look into the phenomenon, the more it seems to come to me. Sometimes it gets quite overwhelming and you have to kind of step back from it. So it definitely seems to me anyway, personally, that definitely happens. The more I look into it, the more it appears.
The more it looks at you, I would agree.
Yeah.
It's an interesting hypothesis. I did a lecture a while ago called Who Conjured Who? Who are the real conjurers? It goes back to the shortest horror story ever written. And the last man on earth was alone in his house. And there came a knock on the door. You know, who's on the other side? And so he opens the door and says, why are you knocking on my door? Well, you built it, right? And so that, is the chicken or the egg. But this understanding, though, is it's very interesting. I mean, it gets back to Crowley. It gets back to Parsons. It gets back to their bastardized Kabbalistic rituals they got from Brahma and the Mage. And the troubling thing for this is okay, these rituals and incantations should not have really worked. But something responded to them, my friends, right? It's like, wait a minute, you know what I mean? And so again, the last man on earth is alone in his house. There comes a knock at the door. We built the door. They're knocking on it.
Yeah. If you build it, they will come. Right.
There we go. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent.
And maybe it's the field of dreams that we're living in as a reality. I mean, it seems. I mean that's I hear it over and over and over and over again. That time is a hallucination. It's a shared hallucination, agreed upon by all of us. But to our visitors, perhaps it's meaningless.
Yeah, well, it's
sundial before it takes place.
Okay, just an observation from Dark Angel, Nathaniel. The date of the apocalypse is not set in stone. It depends on our actions. That's what Dark Angel is there pointing. Okay.
Well, the apocalypse is set by man, isn't it? It's to do with the manipulation of ancient texts, which leads us to that conclusion. There's nothing to state other than our own impending doom, which we all fear because of our families, that it brings that on, isn't it? So it's kind of like playing on your emotions in that sense.
Okay.
Okay. Wow. We've got Tony D is asking if the phenomena has been interacting with humanity for an age. we, as humanity, now are trying to assess it. Maybe ancient civilizations may mistake the phenomena as God and possible Jesus was an abductee.
Well, I think he's probably, Tony. Yeah, you've answered your own question in a way. I could agree with some of that. Ancient civilizations, they might have had more knowledge than we've got now. Has that knowledge been lost? I don't know, but it's forever the human thing in it to search for answers, and no doubt when we're dust, there'll be people behind us still searching for those same answers, unless anybody on panel here thinks we'll have them answers by then. We're going to know by then. If this whistleblower and the revelations come out, it might not give us the answers, the true answers. The only thing we're going to get is, yes, these things are real. Yes, we acknowledge these things are visiting us. That's not an answer, is it, to what they are and where they're from? What are their intentions? What do they want from us? Those are the big questions.
Right. Asking the wrong questions, we're going to get the wrong answers.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get the right questions to ask.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I've got a couple more, I think. Let's have a look. I'll start with this one. Rich White, anyone think there is anything that Dr. Stephen Greer, SETI-5 practice?
Yes, but don't pay anybody to do that for you. He'll charge you $3,500 to do that, and you are perfectly capable of doing it yourself. And also be specific about who you want to meet, because I just put it out there. I just want to, you can ask me if you want, but I want ETs. And I got the little quiet gray guys that don't tell you a darned thing and scared the heck out of me. So it does work. You can meditate them in, but have the right motives, and for God's sakes, don't pay somebody to do that.
Thank you. That's good.
Okay. Well, I think anybody else want to chime in?
No, I think we've a little. Go on, Rev.
I was just going to say, you don't need anybody. It's all within yourself, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is you need to find in order to progress to where you want to be, you've got to look within your heart, and that will take you there. So you've got to make your own judgments.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've got one final question, Paul. I think I'm conscious of the time.
Yeah, because I really want to concentrate on just having 5 minutes with Nathaniel and his experience, if we can fit that in. So it is with a question.
47. Yeah, we might just. I'll send that one through.
Nigel, how you doing, mate? I know this guy. Do you think the whistleblower? Well, we've covered the whistleblower earlier. Do you think the whistleblower is sending a message from the USA, a warning to China and Russia that they have the UFO technology, maybe stop a world war? It's an angle I've not thought of or looked into. Anybody got views?
I think there is no such thing as independent world governments. They're all, at the top level, they're all connected, and they all know everything between them. So that's my view on that, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
We're done with that one. I'm done. Yeah. I'm done, guys. And
well, I think we can just about wind this up. If Nathaniel doesn't mind sharing a bit of his experience stroke encounter, I'd love to hear it.
Very strange. I mean, I'm a lot like other researchers in the field. It starts out with encountering the phenomenon, and you get this passion to understand it more. And hopefully, in understanding it, we'll understand more about ourselves. I moved into a new house, and we were actually touring the home prior to purchasing it, when for some reason, I looked underneath a bed in one of the rooms, and there was a full-bodied apparition of a little girl. And I thought I was 8 years old, so I had no context of this stuff or anything like it. But I remember not just seeing her, I thought that she had belonged to a family in the neighborhood. Maybe perhaps she snuck in when the realtor wasn't looking or something. And but there were three things really that I'll never forget. Number one was the pervasive stench in the room. It smelled like obviously sulfur, rotting or decomposing organic matter. And there was a presence. It felt like consciousness. which I don't know how you can define that, but it just felt like that. And so once I moved into the home, that entity mutated, it evolved, and then it turned into a shadow figure, a dark cloud hovering in the corner of the room. The nightmares begin. The nightmares are always in black and white. Very strange stuff. But to a degree, I agree with Earl Grey. I mean, it was almost like a teaching mechanism where, and here's why I say that. The fear that I was feeling seemed to have been a projection. And it was almost like, they say, the teacher's always silent when the test is taken. I'm there all by myself, and this phenomenon is manifesting. Number one, I wanted to understand why I was afraid of it. Was I afraid of it because I didn't understand it, right? Or was it really wanting to be feared? And so I think that, I guess the reason I'm telling this, it was very instrumental in my upbringing and trying to get me into this research. But I don't know what it was. I could tell you this much: it felt alien to me, but it was also very fear-based. So it's very interesting.
Wow.
Do you think then that seeing that all those years ago put you on the road that you're on now?
Yes.
So that, in a way, presented, knowing that it would have to do that to put you on this path.
Yes, and I could see how many, and I don't mean to ride the fence here, guys. When people hear demonologist, they kind of put me in this little corner, and I got to be like, but I think that, again, I can understand why people, when they experience this phenomenon at first blush, sometimes it's extremely traumatizing because it doesn't fit the ontological worldview. What is this, right? And so, again, I think that, and this gets into just initiatory practices of why they're, why are they looking at certain people to manifest to? But and I'll shut up. I think it's a fascinating field of research, but I do think that some beings will manifest in order to help us evolve. That's where I'm at right now.
And it does, I agree, it does tie in with what Earl said earlier. It's almost a lesson. But does that mean that every sighting and every experience is a lesson? Perhaps we didn't have to take that from it, but that's what it feels like with your experience. Did you tell your parents?
I did. And the phenomenon, as weird as it sounds, I mean, obviously, like, what we're talking about is a little bit strange anyway, so I could say it like this, but they were all asleep. They would go to sleep at night, and I would hear something walking on our floors, which, again, as a child, I'm thinking it can't be a ghost because it's physical, like it's displacing weight. But that really inspired me to think, okay, is hauntology and ufology the same? Or these apparitions, an apparitional theory, you could solidify to the touch and would walk through a wall. And so it's kind of allowed me the intellectual curiosity to not pigeonhole the phenomenon. When I was growing up, they wanted me to, right? Well, it's horns and hooves. And, if they're demons, they certainly got to be Catholic. And so, when I started growing into the data and out of the dogma, it was alarming because I was like, okay, I can do this. I can think like that. And so I think it's exciting. Really, it is.
Any views on that, Earl or Rev?
It's a wonderful experience. I mean, for you, it was a flashpoint of your journey, and so I consider that positive, sulfur or not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think it kind of shows that we were talking about the collective consciousness. There's definitely something. Whether you call it God or whether you call it the unit, whatever there is, there's something that's behind everything that we're all experiencing, and where that comes from, that's the big question, isn't it? So it's but there's definitely that consciousness seems to be to try and guide people with whatever it's doing. It's got that consciousness on it.
Consciousness, we hear that over and over and over. Raise your
we
consciousness.
Probably got 4 or 5 minutes left. I just want to throw this one at you. I know what Rev's views are going to be on this, but anybody got any views on the cryptid phenomena, the dogman, stroke werewolf, the Bigfoot? Anybody briefly, few minutes? No.
Stuff comes through portals.
Yeah, well,
you open a portal, stuff will come through, intended or not. And our visitors use portal technology to get here and to leave here, I think. So,
okay.
Stuff comes through.
Yeah, I was going to say with some of the stuff I've been watching about the Manhattan project, it would appear that when they tried to open a wormhole or porthole, they brought a similar Bigfoot type being that started destroying their equipment. So, yeah, it's definitely, and with my own experience, it's come and gone like it wasn't there. So,
yeah. And what fascinates me about them, that there's often light form phenomena seen in close proximity, seen and time frame to when these things are seen. And if you're a Bigfoot researcher or cryptid researcher, a lot of them don't want to associate that, so that I think they're missing a trick. But what you saw, you said it almost glided, didn't you? You didn't use the word glide. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you didn't see your leg movement. I find that fascinating.
I didn't see no leg movement. No, everything was very smooth. It came in very smooth and unnatural to anything that you'd see that we know as on this earth, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I just wondered if anybody had experienced it, or obviously, Earl. So you receive a case from MUFON. I think you know where I'm going to go with this. It's not a trick question. And somebody sees a UFO, but they also report seeing some strange spheres of light and some strange creature. Do you disregard that?
No. It's just a case of semantics, all right? I mean, at MUFON, they want us to treat this scientifically. So they don't really want to see the name Bigfoot or orb in a case. But if you do describe and use descriptive language, everybody knows what you're talking about, and everybody's comfortable. If I had a case came in with a Bigfoot and a flying saucer, I would say, so many feet across, chrome, disc-shaped object with a 8-foot tall, hairy, malodorous creature standing next to it, beating two logs together. And that serves the purpose, and everybody's happy. I mean, as a nurse, you don't get to diagnose people. You have to write down symptomology, and then you look for the doctor, because the doctor's smart. He's trained in that, and it keeps you out of legal problems as well. And I find that, the same thing works well in ufology. You use descriptive language, it's all.
Answered perfectly. Thank you, Earl. Do you know, on that note, I can't think of anything more to ask. Anybody got anything to add before we close this down? I just want to say thank you to Rev, Nathaniel, and Earl. I really appreciate you giving us that time. And I hope people have enjoyed listening to you. And I'll hand over to Les.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a great privilege to hear you guys and your opinions on these subjects. And on that note, I'll remove you one by one if you forgive the...
As we came in, we leave, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you're going out the same way you came in, Earl. So
just
thank you
like
very much,
real
Earl.
life, I guess.
Bye-bye. Nathaniel, same with you. Fantastic you being on the show. And me and Paul have been really
researcher. I'll just hold my hands up and say it. Absolutely amazing guy. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
I'll give you that $20. All right, Paul. Have a good night.
Good night.
And Jeff, what can we say? Great contributor as always, and great to hear your and it's great that you're actually studying these subjects quite a lot as well.
Yeah, it's good to be involved in the chat, especially with the two gentlemen we've just had. So Earl and Nathaniel, brilliant. Yeah, enjoyed that, and of course yourselves.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I know I have more to do with both of you than the other guests, but yeah, it's good to see both of you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and you.
So we'll see you next time, Jeff.
Take care, everybody. Ta-da.
Thank you.
Right then, Paul. Great show tonight, and I can't remember the guest list for next week, but we've got to thank everybody for coming in tonight's chat.
Yeah, and I think we're going to do a talk about the awakening next week. I could be wrong. I think that's what we've got.
Right, yeah.
We'll be talking to Steve Mirror and Barry Fitzgerald. Hopefully another guest who's going to be talking at the awakening, and myself, and we're just going to be covering some of the talks, some of the discussions that will be occurring, and
Yeah,
having a great
and,
chin
and I think, that's You're right. You just prompted my memory, Paul. And I've got to say, because I did pick up on Chris Evans's post at the OLM conference, for anybody who hasn't heard the news and has booked or wanted to come, that OLM conference in Hull has now been cancelled, which is a great shame, really.
It's unfortunate, and I hope Chris is back next year, with a sort of another conference. Let's hope so, because I think he's done 4 pretty successful conferences and things just haven't panned out this year, but let's hope next year's better.
Okay, on that note then, say good night.
Yeah, good night. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.